The relentless drone of the fluorescent lights pervaded the hospital room, casting a sterile, oppressive hum that seemed to seep into every corner of the space. Myra sat on a hard, blue plastic chair, her feet hovering just above the cold, unwelcoming floor. Her gaze was fixed with unwavering intensity on the bed where her mother, Irma, lay in a state of eerie stillness. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor next to the bed was a double-edged sword. Its steady pulse was both a small comfort and a harsh reminder of Irma's precarious state. The room was suffused with the sharp scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint, almost imperceptible aroma of wilting flowers, a sad token of affection left on the nightstand. The pale green walls, despite their pristine appearance, seemed drab and worn, and the small window offered little respite, admitting only a dim, overcast light. Annie, Myra's grandmother, sat by Irma's side, tenderly clasping her frail hand. Today, the lines on Annie's face appeared more pronounced, carved deeply by sleepless nights and relentless worry. Her voice, though gentle, carried a note of exhaustion as she addressed Myra. "Sweetheart, I need to step out for a bit to grab something to eat." "Stay here, I'll be back soon," Myra responded with a silent nod, her large, sorrowful eyes betraying a depth of grief far beyond her years. Annie gave her a reassuring squeeze before rising slowly, her every movement laden with fatigue, and ambled toward the door. As Annie exited, the room was engulfed in a heavy silence, broken only by the insistent beep of the monitor and the distant, muffled chatter from the hallway. Myra's eyes scanned the surroundings with a growing sense of disquiet. The stark, white sheets, the tangled mess of tubes and wires connecting her mother to the machines, and the wall clock that seemed to drag time at a painfully slow pace. Each passing minute seemed to stretch into eternity, heightening Myra's sense of unease. Rising from the chair, she approached her mother's bedside, her trembling fingers enveloping Irma's cold, lifeless hand. Floods of memories from happier times overwhelmed her, moments when her mother's laughter filled their home with warmth and joy. "Mom," Myra whispered, though she was well aware that her plea would go unanswered. An unsettling realization struck her. Annie was gone, leaving Myra alone with her mother. What if something happened while Annie was away? Who would be there to help? As despair tightened its grip around her heart, an audacious thought began to form. She glanced at her mother one final time, then, fueled by a surge of determination, she left the room. The hospital corridor stretched out before her, cold and empty. Myra moved swiftly, her small frame slipping unnoticed through the shadows. At last she reached the entrance, pushing open the heavy glass doors. The frigid afternoon air hit her with a jolt, but she did not falter. She ran towards the bustling street, her worn boots clacking against the pavement with each hurried step. The city streets, crowded and chaotic, seemed to blur into a whirl of unfamiliar faces. She wandered, the weight of her desperation pressing down upon her, each stride echoing her deepening anxiety. In the heart of the bustling city center, the bank was nearing the end of its busy day. As the clock ticked towards closing time, the relentless flow of customers began to taper off, and the once crowded space gradually emptied. Helen, a seasoned teller with years of dedication behind her, was nearing the end of her shift. Sunlight poured through the large windows, casting elongated shadows that danced across the polished marble floor. Helen's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she counted bills and reviewed the final stack of documents for the day. Her meticulous routine was a comforting constant, a rhythm that had defined her life for decades. Without warning, the bank's door creaked open, cutting through the ambient murmur of the fading day. Helen's attention was drawn to the entrance where a young girl stumbled in. The child, dressed in tattered clothes and a coat that looked several sizes too large, had oversized, worn-out boots that thudded softly on the marble. Her small hands trembled as she clutched a green toy gun, a surreal and disconcerting sight in the otherwise orderly bank. Helen's initial reaction was one of disbelief. What is this child doing here, alone and in such a state, she wondered. Her surprise quickly morphed into concern. The security guard, a burly man with a stern demeanor, observed the scene with a shifting gaze. His hardened expression softened as he looked at the girl. Let her stay for a moment to warm up, he thought, recognizing the biting cold outside. The girl, with a mixture of trepidation and resolve etched across her face, made her way to Helen's counter. Her eyes, brimming with unshed tears, spoke volumes of the desperation she felt. In a voice trembling with both fear and hope, she pleaded, "Please, ma'am, give me some money. I need it desperately. If you don't, something terrible will happen." Helen was momentarily paralyzed. This was a situation unlike anything she had ever encountered. The toy gun in the girl's hand seemed incongruous in this setting, adding an extra layer of unease. Struggling to maintain her composure, Helen leaned forward and addressed the girl softly, "Sweetheart, what's your name? Where are your parents?" The girl, her face streaked with dirt and tears, responded through choked sobs, "My name is Myra. My mom is very sick, and we need money to help her. Please, ma'am, you have to help us." Helen's heart ached at the raw sincerity in the child's plea. She glanced at the security guard, who met her gaze with a look of shared concern and uncertainty. Neither of them was equipped to handle this distressing situation. Feeling a pang of helplessness, but determined to act appropriately, Helen decided to adhere to protocol. Discreetly, she activated the alarm under her counter, summoning the bank manager, Frank. Frank arrived shortly, his face etched with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. A man in his 40s with an authoritative yet approachable presence, he took in the scene with a sharp gaze. "What's the situation here?" he asked, his eyes flicking between Helen and the girl clutching the toy gun. Helen, still reeling from the shock, explained the situation as succinctly as she could. "This little girl has come in asking for money with a toy gun. I wasn't sure how to handle it, so I thought it best to call you." Before her explanation was interrupted as the bank door burst open once more. An older woman, visibly agitated and breathless, burst into the bank. Her steps were hurried, and her face was etched with deep anxiety. She wore simple yet clean clothes, a testament to her attempt to maintain dignity despite her evident distress. The room, now filled with tension and urgency, awaited the next move. "Myra, why did you leave by yourself?" the woman cried out as she rushed to the girl, enveloping her in a tight, protective embrace. She then turned to Frank and Helen, her face flushed with a mix of relief and distress. "I'm so sorry. This is my granddaughter," she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. Frank, who had been watching the exchange with growing concern, stepped forward, his curiosity piqued. "What's happening here?" he asked, his tone both gentle and urgent. The woman, her breath still coming in quick, uneven gasps, struggled to compose herself. "We've been seeking help everywhere, but every bank has turned us away," she said, her voice quivering with desperation. "Myra's mother, my daughter Irma, is gravely ill and requires an urgent operation. We don't know where else to turn." Helen exchanged a worried glance with Frank, who nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "Please come to my office," he said, extending an inviting gesture for the woman and the girl to follow him. Frank guided Annie and Myra to his office, a spacious and elegantly furnished room adorned with dark wood furniture and shelves brimming with books. The soft, fading light of the evening streamed through the large windows, casting a warm yet charged atmosphere over the room. Once they were seated, Frank behind his desk and Annie and Myra in the chairs facing him, the tension was almost tangible. Annie clutched Myra's hand tightly, her attempt to offer comfort betraying her inner turmoil. Frank's gaze was drawn to the small silver pendant that dangled from Myra's neck. It was a simple heart, but it held profound significance. Recognition flickered in Frank's eyes. "That pendant," Frank murmured, his voice laced with both awe and sorrow. Memories surged forth, taking him back to the time when he and Irma had been together before life's cruel separation had torn them apart. The pendant had been a token of their once cherished love, a symbol of an enduring bond that had seemed unbreakable. Annie noticed Frank's intense focus on the pendant and tightened her grip on Myra's hand, as if trying to shield her from a painful revelation. "Yes," Annie said softly, her voice heavy with nostalgia and regret. "It was a gift from her father. Irma never removed it, and now Myra wears it as a reminder of her mother's love." Frank's throat tightened as he looked at Myra, her eyes reflecting the same features he had once adored in Irma. The resemblance was striking and poignant. "Irma," he whispered, his voice breaking with raw emotion. "How is she now?" Annie took a deep breath, her voice wavering as she began to recount Irma's struggle. "Irma is an incredibly resilient woman. She's always been a fighter, working tirelessly to provide for Myra after we were separated. She did everything in her power to keep going, selling cakes at a small kiosk, often working late into the night to make ends meet. She's given everything she has to ensure Myra's well-being." Frank listened, his heart aching with empathy and regret. The weight of the past and the present collided, leaving him grappling with a profound sense of duty and compassion. Frank listened with rapt attention, each word from Annie slicing through his resolve like a knife. His heart ached as he absorbed the gravity of their plight, 2 months ago. Annie's voice trembled with a mixture of sorrow and exhaustion. Irma was struck by a car while she was crossing the street. The driver fled the scene, leaving her injured and unconscious. She has been in a coma ever since. The doctors have said she needs urgent surgery, but it's prohibitively expensive. We don't have the means to cover it." Myra's eyes, filled with a blend of fragile hope and raw fear, locked onto Frank's. Her small voice barely above a whisper, she pleaded, "Please, sir, help my mom." Frank leaned forward, his fingers intertwining as he braced himself against the desk. His mind raced through a storm of thoughts and emotions. "Where is she now?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "She's at the General Hospital," Annie replied, her voice cracking. "We've exhausted every avenue we could think of. We've been to every bank, but no one has offered us the help we so desperately need. We're at the end of our rope." Frank nodded slowly, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. The revelation that Myra might be his child, combined with the dire news about Irma, left him grappling with conflicting emotions. But he knew he couldn't afford to falter. "I'll review these documents," he said, motioning to the envelope Annie had placed on his desk. "I'll see what we can do to assist." A deep sigh of relief escaped Annie's lips, and Myra managed a small, tentative smile. "Thank you," Annie said, her eyes filling with tears of gratitude. "Thank you for listening and for your willingness to help." Frank's gaze moved from the young girl to her distressed grandmother, his own heart a tumult of guilt and resolve. "Don't worry," he assured them with a firmness that belied his inner turmoil. "We'll do everything in our power to help. I'll contact the necessary parties and explore all possible avenues to support Irma." As Frank and Annie delved into further discussions, Helen observed from the doorway, deeply moved by the unfolding drama. The day's routine had been irrevocably altered, but the encounter had imbued their work with a poignant human element that none of them would forget. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm, golden glow over the city, Frank made the essential arrangements to address the urgent situation. Myra and Annie left the bank with a flicker of hope rekindled in their hearts. The outside world, once shrouded in gloom, now seemed tinged with the promise of light. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they felt a glimmer of optimism that perhaps, just perhaps, a turn of fortune was on the horizon. A blend of relief and melancholy settled over him as he approached the living room window, gazing out at the city lights that flickered below. His once opulent and solitary existence was drawing to a close, and though the future remained shrouded in uncertainty, he felt an undeniable sense of being on the right path. The subsequent days were a maelstrom of emotions and transformation. Frank relocated to a modest apartment near the hospital where Irma was undergoing her recovery. Each visit to the hospital was a delicate dance between hope and trepidation. Annie and Myra greeted him with heartfelt gratitude, and each incremental improvement in Irma's condition was a cause for quiet celebration. One afternoon, as Frank and Myra waited in the hospital lounge, the young girl's innocent curiosity shone through. "Where is the lady who lived with you?" she asked, her voice filled with childlike wonder. Frank took her small hand in his and smiled gently. "Lydia doesn't live with me anymore. We decided it was best for us to part ways." Myra absorbed this explanation with the effortless wisdom that children often possess. "Are you going to stay with us then?" she inquired, her eyes wide with hope. Frank felt a surge of warmth and affection. "Yes, Myra, I'm going to stay with you," he assured her. As the days turned into weeks, Irma's recovery, though gradual, continued to make progress. Frank found himself deeply enmeshed in the lives of Myra and Annie. He became a steadfast presence, taking on the role of a father figure to Myra, helping her with schoolwork, taking her to the park, and providing the stability she had so desperately needed. The profound emptiness that had once consumed him began to be filled by the simplicity of everyday life and the genuine connections he was forging with Irma and Myra. Although his life was no longer one of luxury, it was rich with meaning and love. One morning, as Frank was helping Myra prepare for school, Annie approached him with a warm, grateful smile. "Thank you, Frank. We can't even begin to express how much your presence means to us. We don't know what we would have done without you." Frank looked at her, his heart swelling with deep gratitude. "I owe you just as much. You've given me a second chance at something truly precious." Later that day, Frank received an urgent call from the hospital. Irma had awoken. He rushed to the hospital alongside Myra and Annie, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. As they entered Irma's room, they saw her lying in bed, weak but conscious, her eyes brimming with tears of relief and gratitude. "We're here," Irma, Frank said softly, taking her hand in his. "Everything's going to be all right." Irma's lips curved into a faint, tearful smile as she whispered, "Thank you, Frank. Thank you for not giving up on us." Frank's life had undergone a profound transformation, but he faced the future with a resolute spirit, buoyed by the presence of his new family and a rekindled love that guided his steps. The gentle morning light filtered through the hospital room's curtains, casting a warm glow on the scene within. Irma slowly opened her eyes, their heaviness reflecting the effort it took to adjust to the light. Next to her, Annie was slumped in a chair, her head resting on her chest, with Myra nestled in her lap, sleeping peacefully. Irma attempted to move, but was met with sharp pain and overwhelming weakness. As she turned her head, her gaze fell upon Frank, who stood quietly in the doorway, his eyes reflecting a mix of deep concern and profound relief. "Frank," Irma murmured, her voice a fragile whisper. Frank moved forward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Irma, you have no idea how overjoyed I am to see you awake," he said gently. But as he drew closer, Irma felt a surge of discomfort and turned her face away, unable to meet his gaze. Frank paused, acknowledging her need for space with a heavy heart. "I understand this is overwhelming," he said, his voice quivering slightly, "but please let me explain what has happened." Irma kept her eyes fixed on the window, her thoughts swirling as she listened intently. Frank cautiously settled into a chair beside her bed, his posture reflecting both determination and vulnerability. "When I learned about your situation, I knew I had to step in. I couldn't bear to leave you in such a state, not after everything. Myra, our daughter, needs me just as much as I need her." Irma slowly turned her head, her eyes brimming with unspoken questions. Frank continued, his voice steady yet tinged with deep emotion. I've decided to leave my past behind. Lydia and I have parted ways. I am here now, ready to support you, to be a real part of your lives. Annie stirred awake, the earnest tone of Frank's voice drawing her attention. Upon seeing the gravity of the situation, she realized the significance of the moment. Myra, still drowsy, lifted her head and her eyes lit up with joy at the sight of her mother awake. "Mommy," she cried out happily, leaping from Annie's lap and rushing to the bedside. The atmosphere in the room softened with Myra's radiant presence. Irma, despite her lingering confusion, felt a glimmer of hope ignite within her heart. Frank, sensing the intimate and emotional reunion taking place, rose to give the family the privacy they needed. "I'll leave you to have this moment," he said softly, a warm smile on his face as he exited the room. The door closed gently behind him, leaving Irma, Myra, and Annie to savor this precious and poignant moment of reconnection. Frank smiled back, feeling the familiar comfort of their new home. "Good morning, Annie. I slept well, thank you. How about you?" Annie chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with the morning light. "I'm up and ready to start the day. We've got a lot to do, and it's nice to have the house so lively again." She poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one to Frank, who took a moment to savor the rich aroma before taking a sip. As they chatted about their plans for the day, Irma entered the kitchen, looking more vibrant and energetic than she had in months. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice full of warmth. "I thought I'd join you for breakfast today." Frank's heart swelled with contentment at the sight of Irma's improvement. "Good morning, Irma. You're looking great," he gestured to the table, where Annie had set out a spread of fresh bread, fruit, and eggs. "We've got a nice breakfast waiting." Irma sat down, and Myra soon joined them, her usual morning excitement evident as she scrambled into the kitchen. "Mommy, guess what? I finished my project for school," she announced proudly. Frank's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's fantastic, Myra. What's it about?" Myra beamed. "It's about the different seasons of the year and how they affect the plants and animals. I made a big poster with lots of drawings." Annie smiled, reaching over to give Myra a playful ruffle on the head. "I can't wait to see it. You've been working so hard." As they enjoyed their breakfast together, the conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter and shared plans for the day. The house was no longer just a place to live. It had become a home filled with the sounds of family life and the warmth of newfound connections. After breakfast, Frank and Irma tackled a few chores around the house, while Annie and Myra prepared for the day ahead. Frank took a moment to step outside, taking in the fresh air and the bright morning sun. The neighborhood was quiet but charming, and he felt a deep sense of peace as he surveyed the well-kept gardens and cheerful homes around them. The day was full of possibilities. Frank knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but he felt equipped to face them. With each small task and every shared moment, the bond between them grew stronger, and the house continued to transform into a place of love and happiness. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Frank looked forward to the future with hope and determination. The journey from the lonely man he once was to an integral part of this loving family had been transformative, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next with the same strength and commitment that had brought them this far. Frank nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride and contentment. "I can see that. Your work is truly inspiring." The evenings became a cherished time for the family. They'd sit together, sharing stories and laughter, creating new memories as they settled into their new routine. Frank found joy in these simple pleasures, the comfort of their shared experiences enriching his life in ways he hadn't imagined before. One particular evening, after a delicious dinner prepared by Annie, the family gathered around the living room to unwind. Myra, now more animated, talked excitedly about her day at school, we're starting a new science project, and I'm going to build a model volcano," she announced with enthusiasm. "That sounds amazing," Frank said, his eyes lighting up. "I'd love to help you with that. Maybe we can find some time this weekend to work on it together." Myra's face beamed with joy. "Yes, please. That would be so much fun." Irma, resting comfortably on the couch, watched the exchange with a soft smile. The warmth in the room was a testament to how far they had all come. She turned to Frank, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and contentment. "Thank you for everything, Frank. For being here with us, for Myra, and for helping me get back on my feet." Frank reached over and took Irma's hand gently. "It's been an honor to be here with you. You've shown me what it means to be part of a family again." As the evening wore on, the family settled in to watch a movie together. They picked a classic film, one that everyone enjoyed, and cuddled up on the couch. The familiar sounds of laughter and conversation filled the room, creating a sense of belonging that was both comforting and joyful. Frank glanced around at the faces of his new family, Irma, Myra, and Annie. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken together, for the new beginnings they had embraced, and for the love that had grown between them. The movie ended, and as the family prepared for bed, Frank took a moment to reflect on how much his life had changed. From a life of luxury and isolation to one of connection and purpose, he had found something far more valuable: true companionship and the joy of building a life together. As he prepared for bed, Frank looked out the window at the starry night sky, feeling a deep sense of peace. He knew that the path ahead would still have its challenges, but with his new family by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next, embracing each day with hope and love. Frank's reflection was interrupted by the soft, familiar sound of Myra's laughter drifting through the house. He turned to see her and Irma working together on a spring-themed craft project at the dining table. The sight filled him with a profound sense of contentment. Myra's creativity and Irma's renewed vitality were clear signs of how far they had all come. Annie, with her usual grace, was preparing a simple but hearty dinner, her movements a testament to her dedication and love for her family. As she called everyone to the table, the warmth and camaraderie in the room were palpable. They gathered around, sharing stories and laughter, the food a symbol of their togetherness. Later that evening, as the house settled into quiet, Frank and Irma found a moment alone on the porch. The spring air was crisp, carrying the fragrance of blooming flowers. Irma leaned her head against Frank's shoulder, a serene smile on her face. "It's amazing how things have changed," Irma said softly. "I never thought we'd be here, enjoying moments like these." Frank nodded, his heart full. It's been a journey, but one worth taking. Every day feels like a gift. They watched as the last light of day faded into twilight, the sky now deep indigo sprinkled with stars. Frank felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that they had created something beautiful together, a life filled with love, purpose, and resilience. As they sat there, surrounded by the tranquility of their new home and the promise of tomorrow, Frank realized that the true beauty of their story lay not in the challenges they faced, but in the strength they found in each other and the love they built along the way. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Frank, Irma, Annie, and Myra's remarkable story. Their transformation from a life of luxury and solitude to one filled with warmth, purpose, and genuine connection serves as a powerful reminder of the strength of family, the impact of personal growth, and the beauty of starting anew. As we wrap up, we invite you to reflect on what you've learned from your experience. What insights or lessons have resonated with you? How might you apply these lessons to your own life? Please share one thing you've learned and plan to practice in your life by commenting below this video. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us bring more meaningful content and inspiring stories to you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.